The county's got this case. The reason why you're being held here is because I guess there was an issue with your pastor.
He's my pastor. I thought he was my friend.
In a town where doors are rarely locked and Sunday mornings revolve around church bells, no one expects darkness to grow quietly in the shadows. Camden, Missouri looks like the kind of place where secrets don't survive, where everyone knows your name, your family, and your past. But sometimes, the most dangerous truths don't hide in alleys or backwoods. Sometimes, they sit beside you in the pews. For nearly a decade, a brutal murder haunted this community. A man was stabbed again and again, his life erased in a violent blur, and then somehow, the case went silent. No arrest, no justice, just whispers and unanswered questions lingering in the air. People moved on, or at least pretended to. Then, years later, something strange happened. Not a DNA breakthrough, not a surprise witness, but a confession delivered not in a police station but to a pastor. A confession tangled with obsession, faith, fear, and a mind slowly coming apart. What followed was not a typical investigation. It was a psychological tightrope, an interrogation where every word mattered. A truth so disturbing that when it finally surfaced, it forced everyone involved to confront an uncomfortable reality. Sometimes, the person you least suspect knows everything and has been waiting years to tell it, and when the truth finally came out, it changed everything. The program opens with a warning: real police footage, real evidence, real lives permanently altered. What unfolds is not just a crime story, but a slow-burning psychological collapse that hides behind faith, familiarity, and a trusted face. Camden, Missouri, sits near the lake of the Ozarks, the kind of town people move to for peace. A bedroom community, quiet streets, church-centered lives, a place where people wave at each other without thinking twice. For most residents, danger is something that happens somewhere else. But in the spring of 2013, the calm surface begins to crack. 9 years earlier, 48-year-old Tommy Hope was found brutally murdered in his home, stabbed 8 times, his throat slashed, blood everywhere. The violence was personal, chaotic, and fueled by rage. And yet, despite DNA, witnesses, and years of investigation, the case went cold. No one was charged. No one confessed. The town learned to live with an unanswered question until a pastor picked up the phone. At the Camden County Sheriff's office, investigators are used to strange cases, but this one immediately feels different. The initial charge isn't murder, it's stalking and sexual harassment. The suspect isn't a drifter or a criminal, it's a married mother, a devout churchgoer, a woman known for her faith and community involvement. Her name is Clara Rector. Clara has been sitting in the county jail for several hours when investigators begin preparing for interviews. She doesn't look like someone who belongs there. No hardened expression, no defiance, just confusion, frustration, and something else underneath it all: loneliness. Before questioning Clara, investigators need to hear from the man who reported her pastor. Pastor Jerry Slee is interviewed alone. Cameras record everything. He's calm, but visibly uncomfortable. This isn't a story he ever expected to tell police. He explains that it started small, notes left on his desk, innocent at first, then more personal, then emotional, then unsettling. He describes it as a schoolgirl infatuation, something he thought would fade if handled gently. He tells her it's inappropriate. He reminds her they're both married. He tries to draw boundaries, but it doesn't stop. Weeks pass, then months. Text messages begin, emotional swings, accusations when he doesn't respond, notes left on his car, messages at his home. The tone shifts from admiration to entitlement. Eventually, he admits to investigators that he became afraid of her. That alone raises red flags. But what comes next is what truly alarms law enforcement. The pastor explains that Clara left him a notebook, a handwritten story. At first glance, it seemed harmless, but as he skimmed through it, his discomfort turned into shock. The story was clearly about a woman obsessed with her pastor. It described his physical features, his hands, his eyes. It detailed explicit sexual fantasies, graphic encounters, desires she claimed she could never act on, but couldn't stop imagining. The writing grew more erratic as the pages went on, disorganized, almost frantic. Pastor Jerry tells investigators he stopped reading when he realized his wife, or worse, his young daughter, could have picked it up. That was the moment he knew this had gone too far. But even then, he didn't call the police. What finally pushed him to act wasn't the notebook. It was a threat. After Clara contacted his wife directly, rambling, emotional, denying sexual intent, but clearly crossing boundaries, Pastor Jerry confronted her. He told her to stop, to leave his family alone. Her response chilled him. She told him that if he ever told the police what he knew about her, she would destroy him. That's when he made the call. But when investigators ask what he knows about Clara, what she could possibly be afraid of coming out. His answer changes the entire direction of the case. He tells them about a confession. 9 months earlier, on the 4th of July, Clara approached him at a fireworks tent. She was shaking. She said she needed to tell him something terrible. She admitted that years ago, after relapsing into drugs, she stabbed a man to death. Not vaguely, not hypothetically. She gave details. She said she killed him. As investigators listen, they realize something unsettling. There was only one unsolved murder in Camden that matched her timeline and description. Tommy Hope. Tommy had moved to Camden from Texas. A carpenter, a construction worker, known for being generous, friendly, a man who struggled with drug addiction but helped anyone who needed it. He didn't have much, but he gave everything he could. On April 28, 2004, police were called to his home in the early morning hours. What they found was horrific. Blood throughout the house, bloody footprints, a body bearing signs of extreme violence. The killer escaped through a side window into the woods. The weapon was never found. Investigators suspected a personal attack. Drugs were involved. Tommy had been selling to support his addiction. Several suspects were questioned, including known drug users and people he owed money to. DNA collected at the scene later revealed something unexpected. Clara's DNA was present. Blood, syringes, a bathroom door. At the time, she admitted being there. She admitted using drugs with Tommy. But she denied killing him, and investigators couldn't establish motive. The brutality of the attack made them doubt she was capable of it. Her husband, in fact, was considered a stronger suspect. Instead, they make a calculated move. They arrest her on the stalking charges. It gives them legal access, time, an opening. 2 experienced investigators, Dave Rice and Eric Stacks, plan their approach carefully. Between them, they have decades of interrogation experience. They know this isn't about force. It's about patience. They know Clara doesn't see herself as a monster, and that's the key. When Clara enters the interrogation room, she looks fragile, overwhelmed. She doesn't understand why she's being held. She insists she never meant to scare anyone. She just wanted someone to talk to. The investigators begin slow, gentle, focused only on the pastor. They build rapport. They listen. They let her talk. She admits writing the story, says it was a way to process feelings she knew were wrong, claims it was partly fiction, says she needed someone to understand her loneliness, her boredom, her sadness. Emotion pours out of her in waves. Loneliness, isolation, desperation. The investigators recognize it immediately. This is someone who wants to confess. She just needs permission. And as the conversation continues, slowly, carefully, the past begins creeping back into the room. Drugs, regret, and a night in 2004 that Clara has never truly escaped. The door to the truth is finally open, and Clara is closer than ever to stepping through it. As the interview stretches on, investigators shift gears without making it obvious. The pastor is no longer the focus. Drugs are. It's subtle at first. Casual questions. Clara doesn't resist. In fact, she opens up easily. She talks about her history, how it started with cocaine, escalated to meth, pills, anything she could get her hands on. She insists she was doing better for a while, that the worst was behind her. But every sentence carries blame. The drugs ruined her life. The drugs made her lonely. The drugs pulled her back in when she was weak. For seasoned interrogators, this is a turning point. People who are ready to confess often need a moral escape hatch, a way to explain how they could do something unforgivable without seeing themselves as evil. Drugs provide that path perfectly. The investigators lean into it. They talk about addiction, about how drugs hijack judgment, about how good people can do terrible things when they're desperate, scared, or high. One of them even shares personal stories, family members lost to addiction, lives destroyed. Clara listens closely. She nods, destroyed. Clara listens closely. She nods, her posture changes. For the first time, she doesn't feel judged. She feels understood. That's when the past starts bleeding into the present. One investigator carefully mentions that he's worked homicide for years, that he's seen what drugs can push people into, that sometimes violence happens not because someone plans it, but because everything spirals out of control in a single moment. Clara's expression shifts. Her head tilts slightly, like she senses where this is going but isn't ready to say it out loud. Then the word lands. Homicide. For a split second, the room freezes. This is the moment every interrogation hinges on. Clara could shut down, ask for a lawyer, end everything. She doesn't. Instead, she says quietly that she thinks she knows what they're talking about. That alone tells investigators everything they need to know. Now the tone changes. One investigator begins speaking almost uninterrupted, calm, controlled. He talks about the evidence, about DNA, about how they know she was there that night, about how this isn't just coming from a pastor's story, it's supported by physical proof. Clara doesn't argue. you. She starts nodding. Tears well up, but she doesn't cry. Her voice grows softer, smaller. Then finally she says it. It was an accident. Those 3 words change everything. The investigator agrees. He tells her that's exactly what he believes. That accidents happen when people are high, desperate, and scared. That the only way forward now is honesty. He tells her to just talk, and Clara does. She explains that she snuck out of her house in the middle of the night because she wanted to get high. She went to Tommy Hope's house, but the door was locked. She crawled in through a window. They talked. She used drugs. She wanted more. When there weren't any left, things turned ugly. They argued. She claims he threatened her life, threatened to expose her, ruin her marriage. Panic took over. Rage followed. She grabbed the nearest knife. She says she stabbed him without thinking. Over and over. She describes cutting his throat, then running to grab another knife when he tried to get back up. Her words are disturbingly calm, clinical, detached. At no point does she stop to express sympathy for Tommy. No moment of horror, no breakdown over what she's done. She talks about grabbing his wallet, not for money, but because she thought it would make the crime look like a robbery. She talks about escaping through the back of the house, following the exact path investigators found years earlier. When asked about the knife, she lies, says she ground it up. That's when the interrogation tightens. One investigator calmly tells her he's a knife maker, a blacksmith, that grinding a knife down the way she describes isn't possible. Clara freezes, then she backtracks. She admits she hid the knife at a construction site near her home. The truth is spilling out now, uncontrollably. The investigator reframes it as fate, providence, God giving her one last chance to be honest. The language matters. Clara is deeply religious. This isn't manipulation, it's translation, speaking to her in a way she understands. She says her life is over anyway. The investigator counters gently, says what matters now isn't prison, it's her soul. That breaks her. She says that's why she told the pastor, why she couldn't live with the lie anymore, why she needed the truth out in the open before she died. As the confession continues, she brings up her childhood, her mother's schizophrenia, abuse, starvation, brain damage, mental health issues. It sounds like an explanation, maybe an excuse, maybe both. She ends by saying she deserves to be punished, that she doesn't want a defense, that she's guilty. After more than an hour, the interrogation winds down. The investigators ask if there's anything she needs, any calls to make, any loose ends. She asks about a traffic ticket she won't be able to appear for. It's such a small human detail in the middle of a murder confession that it momentarily stuns the room. As they stand to leave, Clara thanks them, not for their kindness, for making it easy to tell the truth. It's one of the strangest moments of the case. For the investigators, there's no celebration, just quiet relief. The weight of a 9-year-old murder finally lifted. They believe Clara felt relieved too, not because she was free, but because the secret was gone. Soon after, Clara Rector accepts a plea deal for second-degree murder. The case of Tommy Hope, cold for nearly a decade, is finally closed. But closure doesn't mean peace for everyone. Tommy's family is left grappling with the violence of his death and the unsettling reality of who killed him. A woman they never suspected, a crime driven by addiction, desperation, and a moment that could never be undone. In the end, investigators say the same thing they always do. Their job isn't to judge how a victim lived. Their job is to speak for the dead. And no matter his struggles, no matter his mistakes, Tommy Hope did not deserve to die the way he did. Justice, at last, had a voice. By the time the interrogation room door closes behind the investigators, the weight of what just happened hasn't fully settled yet. Confessions don't always look the way people expect. There was no dramatic breakdown, no screaming, no collapse to the floor. What Clara gave them was quieter than that, almost unsettlingly calm. A woman who had been carrying a secret for nearly a decade finally set it down. For investigators, the job isn't about relief, it's about responsibility. They had heard thousands of hours of excuses, justifications, and half-truths. In most homicide cases, remorse comes late, if it comes at all. And often when suspects say, "I'm sorry," what they really mean is, "I got caught." With Clara, it was harder to tell where guilt ended and self-preservation began. What mattered was this. The details matched. Her account lined up with evidence never released to the public. The order of wounds, the location of the struggle, the path through the house, the escape route through the window, the knife, the footprints, things only the killer, or someone who was there, could know. For 9 years, Tommy Hope had no voice. Now, finally, he did. Tommy wasn't perfect. Investigators never pretended he was. He struggled with addiction. He made bad choices. But none of that sentenced him to die on his own floor, bleeding out after a violent struggle. None of it justified 8 stab wounds and a slashed throat. Justice doesn't depend on whether a victim lived a clean life. Justice depends on truth. When Clara accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder, the case officially closed. No trial, no jury, no drawn-out courtroom drama, just a legal acknowledgement of what happened that night in 2004. For Tommy's family, closure didn't erase the pain, but it gave the pain a shape, something solid, something named. The years of wondering were over. For the town of Camden, the story cut deeper. The killer wasn't an outsider. She wasn't passing through. She wasn't hiding in plain sight as some criminal mastermind. She was someone people sat beside in church, someone whose kids played with theirs, someone who smiled, volunteered, and blended in perfectly. That realization lingers longer than any headline. It forces an uncomfortable truth. Darkness doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it grows quietly, fed by addiction, untreated mental illness, isolation, and secrets left to rot. Investigators often say they work for the dead. The victim can't argue their case. They can't explain their fear, justify their choices, or tell their side of the story. That burden falls on the people who walk into blood-soaked rooms and carry those scenes with them for years, chasing answers most people would rather avoid. This case lingered not because evidence was missing, but because timing mattered. Justice depended on restraint as much as pressure, on patience instead of force. One misstep in that interrogation room, one harsh word, one rushed accusation, and everything could have ended with a request for a lawyer. The truth would have remained buried, and a man's death would have stayed unresolved, not because it was unsolvable, but because it was handled too fast. Instead, they slowed down, they listened, and they let her talk herself into telling the truth, not because they tricked her, but because they gave her a way to live with it. In the end, no one walks away clean from a story like this, not the investigators, not the family, not even the person who confessed. There is no version where everyone feels whole again. There is only accountability, and sometimes that has to be enough. If stories like this fascinate you, the psychology behind confessions, the thin line between guilt and justification, and how truth finally surfaces after years in the dark, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who's interested in true crime, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.